There's a kind of woman the world still doesn't know how to handle. She doesn't want to be saved. She doesn't want to be admired. She doesn't want to be completed. She just wants to be whole, free, present, at peace. And for many, that's more threatening than any scream of rebellion. Because when a woman doesn't need anyone to feel complete, she escapes the logic that fuels most relationships. The logic of lack, fear-based trade, emotional dependency dressed up as love. She doesn't play games, doesn't seduce to be accepted, doesn't shrink herself to fit into tight spaces. She overflows. And that kind of freedom is terrifying because she can't be controlled. She doesn't beg, she doesn't settle. Carl Jung said, "The feminine is an autonomous psychic energy, creative, sacred. And once it awakens, it never goes back to sleep." This woman is the embodiment of that force. She's not looking for the missing half. She wants to walk beside someone who's also found themselves. And until that happens, she'd rather be alone, not out of pride, but out of clarity. Because the love she seeks is the kind that never asks her to shrink in order to fit. This video is about that woman, about the freedom she embodies, and about why the whole world tries to explain, diminish, or label someone who simply refuses to submit. If you've ever met this woman, or deep down know that you are her, subscribe and hit the bell, because what you're about to hear is what the world still doesn't have the courage to say out loud. A woman's freedom is not terrifying because she's aggressive. It's terrifying because she's uncontainable. She doesn't depend. She doesn't flatter. She doesn't wait to be chosen. And that silent movement of wholeness destabilizes everything we've been taught about what it means to be feminine. For centuries, women were told their role was to please, to serve, to be desired. That love would come as a reward for being sweet, patient, and self-sacrificing. But what if all of that was a distortion? Carl Jung, in exploring the archetypes of the collective unconscious, said the feminine is the energy that welcomes, but also the one that destroys illusions. The feminine isn't just nurturing, it's chaos too. It dives deep. It feels everything. It sees what no one else dares to face. It transforms. And when a woman awakens that energy within herself, it changes how she relates to everything. Her body, love, silence, time. She stops chasing, stops explaining, stops accepting emotional crumbs in the name of some romantic idea that only keeps her small. She begins to see that being alone is not a punishment, it's a portal, a sacred space of reconnection with what was once forgotten. The woman who chooses this path becomes a symbolic threat because she breaks the invisible contract that says, you only have value if you're wanted. And when she breaks that contract, she becomes free, but freedom comes at a price. Carrying such deep silence in a world addicted to noise is not easy. Trusting your own presence when everything around you says you're missing something is not easy. She hears advice she didn't ask for, feels the weight of puzzled looks, lives with the discomfort of standing at the edge. Not because she was rejected, but because she chose it. And still, she continues. Not to prove a point, but because going back would mean betraying herself. This woman comes in many forms. Sometimes she's your sister, your friend, your mother. Sometimes she's you. And maybe you haven't fully realized it yet, but you can feel it growing inside. This impulse to stop living for others' expectations. This rising discomfort with shallow connections, empty compliments, relationships that ask you to hide parts of who you are. This video is a calling, not to disconnect from the world, but to reconnect with the most whole version of yourself. The woman who chooses to be alone isn't rejecting love. She's rejecting conditional love, the kind that only exists if she fits into someone else's mold. She knows true love never demands you shrink yourself to fit. It sees you fully and stays. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you felt this? Have you lived a moment when being alone felt more honest than being with someone who didn't really see you? Drop a comment below. I want to know what this journey means to you. Because when one woman shares her truth, others begin to recognize their own. That's the power of the awakened feminine. It doesn't force, it inspires. It's not easy to recognize your own wholeness in a world that's taught you, since childhood, that being a woman means being a half. Half of someone, half of a plan, half of a story that only makes sense if it ends in romance. And when a woman starts questioning that, everything begins to shake, because it's not just about not having a partner. It's about no longer defining yourself through one. It's about looking in the mirror and seeing someone complete, even when alone. But that doesn't happen overnight. It comes after years of frustration disguised as hope. After nights where she cried not because she was alone, but because she felt lost even in someone's arms. In the beginning, she still tried to fit. She softened her personality, changed her tone of voice, accepted invites she didn't want, all to avoid being too much. But something inside her began to stir. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was clarity, that strange but undeniable feeling that she was betraying herself. And that's when the awakening began. The first step, silence. The decision to stop distracting herself, to stop searching in apps, shallow conversations, rushed affection, for something that could only be found within. It sounds simple, but it's brutal, because in silence, everything surfaces. Insecurities, childhood wounds, the times she was ignored, rejected, made small. The beliefs she carried unknowingly that she had to earn love, prove her worth, be less to be accepted. She had to face all of it, unfiltered, undistracted. And in that dive inward, she started to remember herself. Carl Jung said, "What we don't make conscious controls us." And she realized she'd been driven for years by fears that weren't even hers. Fear of not being wanted, of being labeled arrogant, of making others uncomfortable. But the awakened feminine doesn't fear discomfort. It knows that authentic presence always unsettles what's shallow. Slowly, she started making small but radical choices. Saying no to dates without soul. Saying yes to peaceful nights at home, with a book, with her body resting, with her heart quiet. And with each choice, she felt less alone. Because she was, finally, with the only person she ever tried to save, herself. She stopped giving just to be validated and started preserving herself, not out of fear, but out of love. But this shift isn't free from conflict. External pressure arrives. You should open up more. You're too picky. You'll end up alone like that. She thinks about explaining, but takes a breath and realizes she doesn't need to. Because each time she chooses herself, something strengthens inside her. Not bitter pride, but calm integrity. She understands she doesn't want someone to complete her. She wants someone to walk alongside. Someone who's whole too. Someone who doesn't see her freedom as a threat, but as an invitation. And that is rare. With time, she understands freedom has a price. Time. Because when you stop accepting less, it's natural for there to be a gap, a waiting, a crossing. But she learns not to fill that space with just anything. She learns to honor the silence between songs, the pause between chapters, the space between wanting and finding. And in that space, she blossoms. The feminine, which Jung described as a bridge between ego and the unconscious, takes form in her. She's not just a woman. She's a symbol, a living memory of all who came before, of all who were burned for being too strong, too sensitive, too whole. She honors those silenced voices by being everything they were told they couldn't be. And then something shifts. She stops waiting for love like it's a form of salvation. She begins to see it as celebration. Love is no longer a goal, it's a consequence. She already has herself. And because of that, she only accepts what adds to her. But even with all this clarity, she still feels the weight of walking against the current. She sees women around her settling for less, men intimidated by her clarity, friendships fading away. Because the deeper she goes into herself, the less space there is for relationships that only exist on the surface. That can hurt. And it does. But it's not the pain of loss. It's the pain of expansion. She's learned that when you change your love standards, the world feels emptier for a while. But that's only because it's clearing space. And that clearing takes patience. She's no longer the woman who cried over broken promises. Now, she weeps for how long it took to truly see herself. She realizes that what she once called relationships were often just attempts to fill an ancestral emptiness. She wanted to be chosen because she hadn't yet chosen herself. But now, the choice is made. She looks back without resentment, looks ahead without hurry, and looks inward with reverence. She allowed herself to be a temple, not a display case. And that's why, when someone meets her, they step into sacred ground, a space where love isn't demanded, but shared. She became this woman not by accident, but by choice. She chose to face her fears. She chose to walk through the pain. She chose to stay when everyone else said run. And today, she carries the freedom of someone who has nothing left to prove. What's most curious is that the freer she becomes, the harder it is for others to define her. She's not the desperate single, not the cold independent, not the untouchable mystic. She's a living paradox, strong and vulnerable, soft and grounded, open and selective. And that doesn't fit into labels. She doesn't want to fit. She wants to expand. She doesn't want to be admired for her looks. She wants to be recognized for her depth. All of this makes her a new kind of woman, one who doesn't live to please, but to live meaningfully. She's learned that being whole doesn't mean being perfect. It means being honest about what she feels, loyal to what she needs, intentional with what she chooses. And if you've always thought freedom is the opposite of love, maybe it's time to rethink that. Because this woman shows in every gesture that real love is only possible when you've already learned how to be alone without losing yourself. Have you ever wondered why this kind of woman makes people so uncomfortable? Why she becomes the subject of conversations? Why she stirs judgment, even from those who've never exchanged a word with her? Maybe it's because she represents something many people haven't yet had the courage to become. She is what appears when essence manifests, and essence, when it shines intensely, never goes unnoticed. It stirs, provokes, transforms those around it. That light doesn't come from applause or from external achievements. It comes from the peace of someone who stopped fighting herself. The awakened woman doesn't awaken just for herself. She shifts everything around her. Friends begin to drift. Family questions her. Colleagues judge, not because of what she does, but because her presence reveals what others have not yet faced within. Carl Jung once said, "What we do not confront in ourselves, we project onto others." And this woman has become a canvas for many of those projections. They call her cold, when really she just doesn't accept crumbs. They call her arrogant, when in truth she knows her worth. They say she's unreachable, when all she's asking for is reciprocity. And now, many women feel something pulsing, a recognition, a memory, a desire to live with that same freedom. But how do you begin? The truth is, there's no magic formula. This path starts within. It begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself to be accepted. When you realize that any relationship that requires you to shrink is not love. It's an emotional contract of submission. She learned this the hard way, on her own skin. She went through relationships where she dimmed herself little by little, where she traded her voice for silence, her presence for invisibility. She endured love that came with guilt, affection that was conditional, intimacy used as currency. Until one day, she looked around and no longer recognized herself. That's when she stopped. Maybe not gracefully, maybe in pieces, but she stopped. And that pause changed everything. Because rock bottom teaches you what truly sustains you. There, she realized she didn't need love to feel alive. She needed truth. Real connection. Space to be. She decided in that moment to never shrink again. And make no mistake, that wasn't easy. The world wasn't built for free women. It was designed for functional ones. Sweet, pretty, silent, available. Women who accept less. Who love for two. Who apologize for feeling too much. She saw that everything around her was designed for her to fit in, not to overflow. And still, she chose to overflow. As if something inside you is being touched. Maybe you too were tired of trying to fit, of settling for emotional leftovers, of pretending everything's fine when you're slowly disappearing. And if this speaks to you, write in the comments, I choose myself, not for me, but for you, because something shifts when we put feelings into words. This woman you're hearing about isn't a character. She might be you, or someone you love, or someone you judged simply because you didn't understand her. But maybe now you do. She doesn't want to impress. She doesn't want to prove anything. She's not playing any games. She just wants peace. And for her, peace means not having to mold herself to be loved. Yes, she wants love, but not just any love. She wants a love that can meet her depth. One that isn't afraid of her tears, that won't be threatened by her clarity, that won't run from silence. Because she doesn't need promises. She needs presence. She doesn't care about flowers on special dates. She needs truth in the everyday. She doesn't melt at pretty words, but she opens to the coherence between what's said and what's done. She wants someone who can see her soul and has the courage to reveal their own. But if that doesn't show up, she doesn't collapse. She doesn't enter dead-end cycles just to see where they lead. She already knows. She's stepped out of the logic of lack, and that's why she seems unreachable. But the truth is, she's more accessible than ever to someone who has also found themselves. This woman is a reminder that the truest love begins when we stop begging for attention and start choosing presence. She chose that, and from then on, she never accepted anything less. Some say she's alone, but what they don't see is that she's never been more accompanied by herself. She speaks with her shadows, dances with her memories. She's made peace with the mirror, with silence, with time, and that gives her a strength that can't be taught, only lived. You feel that strength when she enters a room, when she says no without anger, when her silence still echoes louder than any voice. She is living proof that integrity has a sound, and it resonates. This woman slowly becomes a reference. Others begin to notice, to ask, to watch. She doesn't teach with speeches. She teaches through her presence. And maybe, unknowingly, she's already changing the world around her, not with banners, but with being. She's living the most silent and most powerful revolution there is, being whole in a world that profits from our fragmentation. This woman is a symbol, but she's also a path. And for those who feel the call, she won't tell you what to do. She just lives, and that's enough. This woman isn't waiting for someone to save her. She's living in a way that challenges everything we were taught about what it means to be loved. And while the world chases distractions, she walks toward her own truth. She doesn't want to be completed. She wants to overflow, alongside someone who has also found themselves. If these words spoke to you, if you recognized parts of yourself, or simply understood something that once felt confusing, stay here with me. Another video is coming up now, and it might be exactly what you need to hear. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.